All right, good morning. It's 11:30 on Saturday, the 15th of September. I'm Nick Petro at the National Weather Service in Raleigh with your Tropical Storm Florence briefing. We're going to try to keep this real short here. I know everybody's super busy, and we just want to just get a quick update here so folks can go back to their activities. So I just wanted to put up front the three key points. The worst is not over yet. So for those who are, let's say, south of Highway 64, south of Highway 70, you know what I mean? It's still cranking out there. But for those who are north, you might be wondering, hey, it's actually looking out my window here in Raleigh. It looks like a decent day out there, but that's deceiving. So there's still lots of rain bands out there. For those who are particularly across the northern half of the state, there's still a lot of dangers out there. And if you depart and head out and start driving somewhere, you might drive and find yourself in an area where it's really bad, and you may not be able to get back. So for those who are listening via YouTube, and for our friends amongst the public here who might be watching this, certainly keep that in mind. The worst is not over yet. Don't venture outside. Best to just stay home and let this thing get over with, and recovery gets started before anybody heads out. All right, we're still expecting a lot of rain. There's still some rain bands that'll move ashore, about 10 to 15 inches of additional rain. After I'm done with the slides, I'll show some radar that hopefully will convey that, better convey that anyway. So we'll show that here after the slides. And of course, the river flooding is going to be the big story, particularly the lower Neuse and even the middle Neuse. And the Cape Fear River are the big problems. The Yadkin, there's even major flooding as well. So I'll show you those hydrographs in a minute. I've kind of already alluded to this. Extreme impacts for flash flooding still yet today. Again, particularly the southern half of the state. River flooding eventually, where it already isn't happening. We're starting to see some of the rivers already rise above flood stage. When you get into those bands of heavy rain, there'll still be some gusty winds to tropical storm force, and we still have some tornado. There's, in fact, tornado warnings in effect right now. I'll show that again after the slides. And, of course, a lot of folks have power outages. And this kind of summarizes, again, I don't want to spend a lot of time on this slide. I know everybody's really busy, but definitely take a look at this after the webinar is over. But, we still have a long way to go, and the worst is not over yet. So, again, refer to this when I email the slides out and post them on our webpage. Florence it's still technically a tropical storm, about 40 miles south of Florence, but look how slow it's moving. It's hardly moving at all, 2 miles an hour. So that means it's going to take a long time for the rain to get out of North Carolina. Okay, that's the key point there. For our wind threats, again, mainly associated with those heavy bands. So let's say, along the Highway 24 corridor and south. It may even be, some of those bands that sneak north of the Highway 24 corridor, get up to about the Highway 64 corridor, there still could be some gusty winds. So, but overall, the wind threat will gradually diminish as we head through the day, and particularly tomorrow. How hard will those winds blow? We're talking gusts in the 40s are still possible. Even south of the Highway 64 corridor, up to about the 64 corridor. Heck, even up to the state line, you could have a gust of 30 to 35, the Virginia state line, that is. So, nobody is out of the woods yet when it comes to wind, but the strongest winds are expected south, embedded in those stronger rain bands. All right. How much more rain? This is not how much has fallen already. This map does not take into account what has already fallen. This is additional rain valid from 8 a.m. this morning. So perhaps it does take into account the last 3 hours of rain. But the bottom line, this is from 8 a.m. tomorrow through the end of the storm. And the swath of rain we're expecting, again, you can see this swath here of 10 to 15 inches of rain, extending across the southern coastal plain, the southern Piedmont, the Sandhills region, eventually up into the western Piedmont, and eventually the mountains. So the mountains will get in on this, and that'll create flash flooding concerns and landslide issues there as well. So still some rain to fall. All right, getting on to the next slide. So what does that mean in terms of flooding rain? This is for flash flooding as well, but the worst of the flood threat will be coincident with where the heavy rain falls naturally. That's pretty common sense. Where you have the most rain, that'll have the greatest risk for flooding. So we're talking, the southern and western Piedmont eventually the western Piedmont as we head towards Sunday and Monday. So the biggest risk, obviously, is across the southern half of North Carolina, let's say, for the risk for extreme flooding rains. We do have tornado warnings in effect. That tornado threat will continue right through the rest of today. So do keep that in mind as well. And again, here's the area painted in yellow and orange where we think the greatest risk for flooding will occur. So anyway, shifting to river flooding. Bear with me here for a second here. I said the greatest risk for flooding. I meant tornadoes with this particular slide, so apologize for the mix-up there. All right, so let's shift to river flooding. So these hydrographs show the forecast, which I know you see the timestamp down in the bottom are slightly dated here. We'll send out these updated slides as soon as the new ones are issued any moment. But the big picture is Neuse River, Cape Fear are two of the rivers that among many, not just the only two, but among many that will see catastrophic flooding develop as these rain bands continue to move in. So getting into the details. So first by basin. So the Neuse River, the big problem is going to be, of course, at Goldsboro. We've had just a ton of rain in Wayne County, falling right near. Normally, the floodwaters have to come down to Goldsboro. Well, the floodwaters in this case developed over Goldsboro. So this is that's why it responded so quickly, because the floodwaters input were right essentially in the area where the flooding's occurring. So we are expecting major flood to be reached. 27.3 feet is the expected crest. All right. So what about the shifting west into the western portion of central North Carolina? Again, still, and this hydrograph is updated as of 10 o'clock this morning. We're still predicting a crest of about 33.5 feet. Which is, about 3 feet below the record there at the Yadkin River. So folks out in the western portions of central North Carolina, you're not out of the woods there. In fact, but some of the rain still has yet to come into the area. The Rocky River near Norwood, we might need to make some adjustments here. You can see the rivers aren't quite making the curve yet to start heading up. But assuming that rain does get into that basin, record flooding there. The Deep River at Moncure, moderate flooding, and let's see. Let me just go back to see if these here updated. Looks like I'm missing. Bear with me here for a second. So I do want to point out the Cape Fear, which I'm going to show on this slide here on the right, is still expected to crest, even though it says 10:07. That one update hasn't come in yet, but it is. I have talked to the folks at the Southeast RFC, and they are not planning on making any changes to this particular hydrograph. So 62.3 feet is going to remain the forecast for the crest there on Monday night into Tuesday morning. Looks like they did push the timing back just a bit, but that's the situation there on the Cape Fear at Fayetteville. All right, so this map here, and again, I'll let you take time on your own to read the boxes there on the right there. But the key point here is the further you go south, the more extreme the impacts are. Okay, so basically along, from Goldsboro to Dunn to Southern Pines and points south, that's where we expect the greatest risk for loss of life due to flooding. There obviously is flooding ongoing in many portions of the southern portion of the red area, the high impact area. So I don't want you folks there in the red and orange to feel like it's not so bad. Clearly, there are flooding and flash flooding issues ongoing and widespread tree damage, again, in the area highlighted red. So certainly, a threat to life and property there as well. The further you go north, you're not impact free. It's just not as widespread and perhaps maybe not as bad at this point. So we're keeping an eye on things, obviously, as the rain bands shift west, and we may have to slightly adjust this map as we head later this weekend, and the impacts also shift westward with time. All right, so let's just wrap this up, and then after we're done with the slides here, for folks who want to stick around for the radar summary, I'll shift to that here. But Tropical Storm Florence, obviously, it's made landfall, expected to slowly meander and continue to move across South Carolina. Obviously, with the event underway, our confidence is high, but the main takeaway is catastrophic flooding, both flash and river flooding expected. Strong sustained winds will continue, particularly in those higher reflectivities in the rain bands. Again, the strongest winds and the greatest risk for flooding will be higher south and lesser north. When I say lesser, I mean up near the Virginia border. And then, of course, we still have a risk for tornadoes today. They're short-lived. They're hard to really get much lead time on them because they're shallow. They're weak. They only last for split moments. So be definitely ready to move the shelter if you get a tornado warning on your telephone, or your cell phone, I should say, as those rain bands move ashore. Okay, here's the 3 points. I already showed this up front when we first began, but the worst is not over. I can't emphasize that enough. Best to just stay home. Don't go out on the roads. Just stay put. Let the rain continue to fall. Get to a safe place if you're not already, and just let this play itself out before you try to venture out. And let the relief folks and response folks do their job to make things safe again. All right. So with that, we will be updating these slides as warranted and as needed. We'll definitely have a new set of slides by 5:30. That'll be coincident with our next webinar. But if we see the need that something's changed in these slides between then, we'll get these out as well. As soon as we disconnect here, I'll also be emailing these particular set of slides out. But again, be sure to join us again at 5:30 later today for another one of these webinars.